Welcome back, guys. We are officially back to working on the E36 in today's episode. We spent the last few episodes working on the turbo manifold for the 308, and it came out pretty well, but it was a ton of work, and I really slaved over it this weekend and spent a bunch of time editing. So honestly, I kind of had to catch my breath yesterday or I was going to get burnt out, and burnout is real. I don't want to come in and just not want to work on anything. I'm not about that. So caught my breath yesterday. I'm feeling good today. I'm ready to get under the E36 and find out what we're working with. If you didn't see the last episode, we pulled everything off the back of the car to get the subframe out of it, only to find out that the floor where the subframe mounts to it it's bad. It needs a lot of work. It's gonna take some fabrication to fix this thing. It has been rearranged, if you will. But we do have to do some explorative surgery. We need to cut out some of the factory floor so we can see inside, because there is a captive subframe mount that has been completely torn from the body. It's not a good situation, but we need to fix it. So we're gonna get underneath this thing and start cutting it up, doing some cleanup, and try to get a game plan together. And then I've got the M3 out because it's officially for sale, although it might be spoken for, but we'll touch on that at the end of the episode. Let's get underneath this thing and figure out what we're working with. The first order of business this time around is to take pretty much every LED shop light I've got and get it hung up underneath this thing, either with magnets, clamps, or even zip ties for the big one, because I'm assuming you guys would like to see what you're doing, and I definitely need to see what's going on underneath this thing. With all the lights in place, we're able to see what we're actually working on, and it's this, the factory subframe mount that is all sorts of broken. It should not look like this whatsoever. It is very clearly quite smashed, and if you don't know what it should look like, this right here is what the factory mount looks like on the other side of the car. It is nice, simple, clean, smooth, versus this, which is clearly very broken. So we got to figure out what's going on. Up next is cleaning everything off, and so I'm showing the tools that I use as always. This time around, the bristle pad on the die grinder once again. And I do want to take a second to say, I can't recommend this Milwaukee die grinder enough. I've fallen in love with it, and I find myself using it every day. And to be clear, no, I wasn't paid to say this. It's not a sponsorship. I just want to share with you guys a tool that I have found to be absolutely fantastic. The bristle disc worked really well against the undercoating and the primer and paint on the bottom of the car, and made really quick work of removing it all so that we can have some bare metal. The idea here being that, one, we're gonna have to weld and fabricate in this area, so it's nice to have it clean, and two, so that we can actually see all of the damage. It's important to get the area as clean as possible so we can get a good understanding of what we're even working with here. All right, so we've got most of our paint removed, the undercoating removed, so we've got some bare metal to work with and mark on and weld up once we get to that point. There's a little bit of cleanup to do still, but I do see two spot welds up top. I'm wondering if those are related to how the actual subframe mount is attached inside. Might not be, they're kind of off a little bit, but this is completely broken loose in here, and we've got to reattach it. You can hear it vibrating. But I need to see how much of the structure inside is retained and what makes sense. I think I'm gonna go on and draw a line across the top here and try to cut off a lot of this broken material in one piece, which will also give us access to the inside, and we can see what the structure in here looks like and what we're gonna have to repair. So let's draw a line and see how nice of a cut we can get off of this, and maybe with a bit of luck it'll be smooth enough we can put it back when we're done. I took 2 attempts at drawing a line for cutting, the first of which was an arc, but I revised that plan and went with a more traditional rectangle for the ease of cutting it and for replacing this panel if it won't go back in. And I think it was the right move. So I think I got pretty lucky with where I cut. I was right about the spot welds up top. Those are for kind of holding the top of this bracket. It's interesting to be able to see what the inside of this looks like here. Had no idea before. But the cut worked out pretty well. And the main piece that we're looking at is this guy right here. So a big stud threads into the bottom of this, and this guy up here was clearly welded to the top of that, and it broke at the edge of the weld. You can kind of see here that this is pulled down some. So we're gonna need to hammer that back up into shape so that this will sit at the right height. If we finagle it back up in there, we can get an idea of what this guy used to look like. Pull down on it, it's something like that. Overall, this shouldn't be supporting that much load. It should be all distributed against the sheet metal here, which is what we're really trying to fix, and then we're gonna put a whole reinforcement plate over all of this. So I feel pretty good about it. I think that's gonna be our approach. So we need to get this cleaned up, we need to get this cleaned up, hammer that back into shape, and then we will weld this into place. We will add a bracket, and then we will come over under here and start the repair on this side. We gotta clean all this up too. And before I get too far, I figured I'd show you guys the pieces that were removed and how they interact with each other. So this is about how those should go. So we're actually gonna try to get all this stuff welded back up. I'm gonna have to do some real cleanup, but I think everything should go. We use some weld through primer on some stuff on the inside before we actually close it up for good. But we're gonna give this a shot, see how it works. With the part at least loosely cleaned up, I got to hammering on it, trying to flatten out some of the sheet metal, which, as you can see, didn't really want to cooperate. I then got out the welder and tried to tack some of it down, but it was my first introduction as to how some of this might go. The dirty backside of the metal popped immediately, but I got some of it put back together and got it ready to go in the car. In order to flatten the deformed seat up top, I used a socket put backwards on an extension and hammered it back into place, which worked perfectly. Then it was just a matter of cleaning out all of the paint so that we can begin welding. Alright, so we're all cleaned up, and after hammering that flange back up and getting this thing into place, I feel a lot better about how it fits. Everything looks like it should weld up real nice. We don't have any gap. Sorry about the lighting. So we'll get that welded up. I'll figure out what I want to do about the back. I might actually want to approach it from the back side, cut a hole through the seat pan. And then after that's all in place up there, we'll start addressing this down here, try to hammer it out, get it flat, and then we'll approach our cap. See if we can't get this all boxed back in. I got the part tacked back in, only to realize that I had overlooked something, and that's that the threads for the stud are marred. I couldn't put the stud into place to actually line things up. I tried to use a tap from the bottom because I have one with the right thread pitch, but it was very clear that the marred threads at the bottom were causing the tap to cross-thread, making this not a viable solution. So frustratingly, I had to break the part free and come up with a new solution. Knowing the threads at the other end of the part were fine, I decided to clamp it in the vise and re-chase the threads from the top. And thankfully, this actually worked. With the bolts seated, it was time to do this a second time. Alright, so I'm sure you guys could see the weld prior. The front face of it turned out okay. I got it all welded to the shaft of the actual support, which I'm fine with, but I did blow a hole through it in the back, and I cannot get back there to fix it, so that confirms it. I am going to, in the future, hop up into the car and approach it from the back and probably add some whole sort of cap to it. We've got the front half of it done, so I think that's going to be fine to cover up. So now I'm down here on the bottom, and I have put a hole at the end of every single crack. We want to prevent all of those from cracking. And if we look here, this is all lined up and the original spot welds are in their old holes. There's a little bit of distortion, but overall, I mean, we are within fractions of a millimeter, fractions of an inch, whichever you prefer, I feel pretty good about this, so I'm gonna go on and start welding some of this stuff up, and then we will see if we can't fit our cat back on it. And that should leave just the inside to do in a future episode. Man, I thought welding the collector at the workbench, having to sit in the chair and look up at it was tough, but welding this thing directly overhead sucks. This is not fun. And the biggest problem that I'm facing at the moment is that the inside of that material there is dirty and it has primer on it and cosmoline, things like that. I cleaned everything that I took off and cleaned everything that I could, but there's a lot I don't have access to. And so every time I go to start welding, it just spurts, it explodes, it pops right on the tungsten. I gotta stop, I gotta clean the tungsten. It'll blow the weld out, it'll start a fire, etc., etc. It's just slow going and it's constantly a mess, and I'm getting pretty frustrated with it, honestly, but I want to get better at this TIG thing. I could have just gotten out the MIG and been done with it already, but there's no way I'm gonna get better without just suffering through it. That's how you learn to do something. Let me show you guys what I'm working with and then why I think I'm at a stopping point for the day, unfortunately. So this is where we're at, and I'm sure to a lot of you guys it doesn't look any better than it did before. The welds are pretty ugly, as mentioned. They all keep exploding and popping. But the one thing I can say we have going for us now is that this whole face is now flat and everything's back into alignment. It's located where it should be, and so now what we need to do is just come in and weld all of these cracks and all of these holes and get everything all closed back up. And then we'll grind it back flat and put our big reinforcement plate on it. So I'm not too worried about how it looks. Like I said, a lot of this is just to get better at what I'm doing. You can probably also see kind of some of the cracks that I've drilled holes in the ends of. Welded some of this stuff up back here already. It's coming together. I mean, obviously I wish that it looked a little bit better, but gotta learn somehow. And it's slowly becoming one piece. And like I said, I'm happy that we're just back into a single plane. You can see everything's located where it should be. So we're in good shape. We just got to go in, weld it up, and clean it up, make it not look like absolute trash, because this shit is just not working. All right, so the other question is, why stop for the day? And I'll be honest, maybe this is a little bit of an excuse. It probably is. I got some other stuff I got to do today. But I'm telling myself it's because it keeps catching fire inside the car. Now, if you don't know me and don't know my history, I have had my garage burned down before. I take fire very serious at this point. I don't mess around with it. When that front plate wasn't on there, I could see it every time it happened. I could stop, I could blow it out. But now with it in place, that undercoating that's in there, or maybe the cosmoline, something keeps catching fire, keeps setting off, and now I can't really see it happening. I can tell by the smoke, but that could be too late if I'm not careful. I don't want a surprise on my hands, and I look up and my car is on fire on the lift, especially since the interior is what's on the other side of that panel. I've seen videos online of cars on a lift, somebody welding underneath, and they wind up completely ablaze. I don't want to be that idiot. I'd rather just wait until I got Khalil back here. He's currently in New York City. Once he's back, he can lend a hand and keep an eye out, and or once I go inside of the car and I cut the floor out so that I can weld the top of that subframe mount, then I have a lot less to worry about and keep an eye on everything. Or maybe I just have some other stuff to do. We can turn our attention towards the M3. There's nothing really new to share about the car. But as I mentioned, it is officially for sale, so I figured it'd be fun to get one final look at the car in case it does leave before it makes it back on the channel. This thing's been a ton of fun and I absolutely love it. I'm gonna miss seeing it around and having it to drive because it drives absolutely wonderfully. It might be one really rough M3 on the outside, but given how well it drives, it is truly a special car. It's phenomenally quick, and it can find its way around a racetrack at a really impressive pace. Not to mention, I was really lucky to find an M3 with literally no rust at all, and it's never been wrecked. It's got incredible bones underneath wear and tear that can only come from years spent racing on a track like an M3 should be. And I'm excited for this to go on to a new home with someone who will continue to drive it at 10/10ths just like I have. All right, guys, we're gonna call this short but sweet episode a wrap. I hope you guys didn't mind the brevity, but had some other stuff to get done. I'm leaving town for the weekend, gonna be traveling, so we'll have to see what we can accomplish on Monday when I get back for Tuesday's episode. But that's when I will catch you guys. As always, we'll stick to it. We'll see what else we can get done. I appreciate the support and thank you guys for watching. As always, I'll catch you all in the next one.